goes. Thank you for being so supportive and gathering with us for this 26th summit that is freely given. May our gather be well. And here we've assembled once again, here joining in together for our first roundtable discussion of the GatherVerse 2024 Virtual World Symposium, titled, What is Virtual Existence? We have with us today Maria Villar, Ruth Diaz, Jenny Ogden, and Jens Cole. But before we get started, because we have a lot to unpack, I'd like for each of you to be able to introduce yourselves and why was it that you felt in your hearts to be able to arrive with us today? But we're so happy to be able to assemble with you all for this 26th summit and to kicking off this 3-day extravaganza, if you will. And panelists, if you can mute your mics until called upon, and we'll begin with Maria, please.
Hello. Well, I'm the founder and CEO of Immersive Studios and also the Portuguese representative of Here Immersive, the European branch of GatherVerse, and I'm joining today because I feel like GatherVerse also aligns with our values of doing the work for the community, very aligned with the human values, and putting all this in place, the work that we're doing in the perspective of serving, but also on creating something better for humanity and our society.
Thank you, Maria. We're very happy to have you. And as a representative of Your Immersive, the audience, if you haven't had a chance to be able to understand the work that Your Immersive is doing and does so well for what we call the XR industry and more, check them out. Ruth?
Hi, I'm Dr. Diaz, or Ruth. I am founder of Bridgemakers, bridgemakers.world. I'm helping improve social VR culture by upskilling leaders, community leaders in social VR to understand conflict and respond in an inclusive way.
Dr. Diaz, Ruth, we're so very happy to have you with us today to assemble with us again, and we look forward to your expressions. Jenny.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Ogden. I'm the founder and CEO of IQ Productions and an entrepreneur with a passion for social impact storytelling. And I work across formats, generally in immersive formats, so XR, whether it's location-based, AR, or VR. I've done all of the above. And I think that when we're in an immersive environment, in a virtual reality, it's so important as designers or creators to design for the world we want to see. So positive, inspirational, designing for joy, for awe, very powerful environment. So,
what heartfelt early sentiments. You've already got the lead on all of us, Jenny. So we have a little bit of catching up to do already, I suspect. And lastly, dear Jens, who's been with us on several occasions and whom we enjoy always the opportunity to be able to assemble with. Jens?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My background is in arts and in expression, creative expression. And what I'm actually feeling is happening is that we have an incredible opportunity to celebrate with each other, to celebrate our contemporary existence. And we take for granted so much that we can be in the same room, virtually speaking, or even physically. So I'm probably here to go a bit deeper on the possibilities that we are being given through technology, and our creative output finds resonance in these technological inventions. And what I'm trying to achieve is really a deeper connection of humanity and a heartfelt expression that is not being harvested necessarily by profit thinking. And I think we really are now ready to take the next step where we can leave behind certain mindsets and paradigms that really go just in the profit direction. I think there's so much to discover about humanity, and it's a privilege to actually dive deeper with all of you.
Thank you so much, Jens. And it certainly is, for me, to echo on Jen's sentiment, it really is a pleasure to be with each of you. I'm very familiar with the work that you've done and that you're doing, and it really is an honor. The wood that you're chopping is extraordinary. I've had time to spend with each of you and to be able to survey the incredible lens of experience and how that's manifested in your daily doings. And so thank you so much for joining us here with this assemblage that we've been able to arrive to with everyone that's showing up at GatherVerse Live. It really is heartfelt to have this opportunity. Dr. Diaz, we have the first question on deck is, how do you personally interpret the concept or reality of virtual existence? But permit me to add a little bit of layer on that, a little bit of pepper, if you will, that when we think about virtual, I think there's been a big obstacle concerning different industry, if you will, those that are involved in immersive technologies, extending reality. As a technologist, and unto other different technologists, the other technologists that I'm here with now, I feel like we haven't done the best job in defining what this technology is, its use case, and how people apply it in their daily lives. But I also realize that we're still figuring it out ourselves. But the reason that we titled this is going back to first principles. What is virtual existence? What does this mean, this extended layer of reality, extending reality? I'd like for you to give a perspective, because I know that the work that you've been working on, whether in virtual worlds, in dealing with so many different personas and so many different people in large, vast communities. Can you bring us into a little bit more of what this means when we talk about virtual existence?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the first thing, I'm very human first as a value. And so before I do the 1,000 feet high view, something personal about me is that the last words my father ever said to me before he died, when I told him that I was working in virtual reality, is he said, "Is it really real if it's virtual?" And that hit my heart, because it helped me understand that he was in a generation that just really interpreted the word virtual the way I was raised to think about it. It was an idea, but it wasn't really there. And it was a projection of sorts. As I've evolved in my own professional identity, part of my background is I studied psychology. And one of the authors and luminaries that I followed was Carl Jung, who believed in this concept of the collective unconscious. And he believed on some level, it's hard to completely know, that we could also kind of mind meld or meet in this other reality place, and that we had to find that through our own shadow. I think that the bridge to virtual reality or virtual existence has been through entertainment and escapism so far, to kind of build that technology and get the enthusiasm and excitement going. And I believe this technology, where we can immerse ourselves in these fantasy dreamscapes, especially in social virtual reality, where it's user-generated content, and we're sharing our dreams and our nightmares, and we're trying to learn about each other from a very intimate place of that collective unconscious. I have a hope and believe that we are trying to wake ourselves up to a global citizenship, into our responsibility to be a global village together. And that's what I'm doing with my virtual existence. No matter how immersed I am, I'm working to integrate my hopes and my projective identity of who I hope to become with who I am now, And I do that by really trusting the randomness and the serendipity of who I encounter in virtual existence. Maybe I'm not really there, but to somebody else, I'm really there for them.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz, for expressing those sentiments, and we'll surely come back to you in just a little bit. But Jenny, I'd like to be able to hard into you when it comes to this, because to segue this over, that when we think about virtual existence, there's certainly is the enterprise business narrative, if you will, but there's also the narrative of touching on some things that, excuse me, that Dr. Diaz touched on, that in this earth that we've all been brought into, that there's dividing lines naturally of states and countries, transmetropolitan, transcontinental. But in a lot of ways, an iterative scale, have we really even considered the magnitude, how we're able to communicate one to another now more than ever? I mean, here we are, we're sitting in here in the Virtual World Symposium in a broadcast studio. It wasn't like this in the 80s. And so what does this narrative mean to you when we talk about virtual existence, and how are you defining it?
Well, that's a big question, and something that Ruth touched on is the generational divide and the opportunity for intergenerational meeting place in this virtual reality, and also this international. I think the world is becoming smaller. I think that digital natives, our Gen Alpha kids that are digital natives, that saw their first concert in a game, that saw their first maybe cultural experience in a game, that has an expanded friend group in platforms like Roblox, from everywhere in the world, and a larger friend group now than they ever had. Kids these days are more interested in their digital virtual personas than they are in their, school day, because they have a larger friend group. So we're seeing what could become a very positive shift in being able to walk in both worlds and still hold our personal beings and not see such a divide that us as older generations might struggle with, like, and this isn't real, this is real. Well, but it's relationship, so it is real, right? I think that it's going to continue on that path, and we also need to make sure that we don't lose touch with our personal relationships, personal in-person relationships, our connection with nature. So there's kind of a fine line, and I think we're finding balance. We haven't quite yet, but I think COVID really was a big turning point where people were going, we had to go virtual, right? And now it's kind of rebalancing now that we're out in the real world, and we'll find our footing and our personal balance between our virtual existence and our physical existence as far as location. So
I find that fascinating, the sentiments of discovery. I would agree, because the technologists that have been involved in developing these platforms, they have, in many ways, are having to understand how to use these tools and how they're applied for their own selves. Even the innovators are having to figure this out. It's similar to what was expressed when you take a company like OpenAI, for example, that there's really the sentiment that they're a group of experts that are building pots and pans and delivering it to us, the chefs of the world, curious to see the dishes that we make. And it's very fascinating given the ubiquity and how large AI is. And Maria, we're coming to you, and then Jen's shortly to you as well. But Maria, it's interesting as I'm sitting here listening under the banner of both Dr. Diaz and Jenny about what this means from their experience, but also with the idea that we're still discovering. And as Jenny brought up, that we've never become more virtual, if you will, in the past 4 or 5 years than we have ever. It's especially been propagated through what was happening when we entered into this pandemic. But this brings to a different sentiment of Gage. Just even 4 or 5 years ago, the extended reality technologies that we were engaged in, whether you're immersive or elsewhere, it's different now because artificial intelligence has arrived to the shores in the narrative in ways that we never thought imagined. And some would confess that the technologies that we're seeing and that we're using today, Maria, they weren't supposed to be here this early, but yet here they are. And now they've integrated into the process and they've found themselves in the process of scale. With that said, you're doing extraordinary work in Portugal, and with your lens of experience and with immersive studios, what does this now mean in this world of frontier intelligence? Now that we're looking to explore and define virtual existence, there's an added layer into that. What does this mean now today in October the 15th for us here in 2024?
Well, first of all, I really like the question because you say personally, because it's personal. All of us, we have different, I wouldn't say even different opinions, but different concepts, because all of these immersive technologies and emergent technologies, it all goes so fast that all of us creates an idea of what it is and what it can be. This time, as you said, today, we're entering a very strange but amazing era where we're going to have, or some of us already have, a double identity. Like Jenny said, we're between the physical world and the virtual world, which means that maybe some of us, we cannot fully express ourselves for whatever reason in the physical world, but we can do that in the virtual world. And that can be bad, or it can be great. We can have our fully capable version of ourselves. We can be whoever we want to be, but it definitely comes with some challenge. And some of the challenge has to do with artificial intelligence. AI just speeds up everything. It just makes this concept of virtual existence being not well defined for all of us, because we all have different ideas. But I think at the end of the day, a raw idea of the virtual existence is really having a digital extension of ourselves. And like Ruth said, I feel it's very interesting because it isn't just about avatars. It's not about avatars. It's us experiencing a feeling, a sensation of being in another world, but it's virtual. So we don't need to be there. It's a sensation, but it's real. It's real. If we're feeling it, if we think we're there, it must be real, right? So I think all of us, this time, I think it's challenging our idea of selves, our idea of identity. And now we need to define not only for ourselves, but for society, which are the lines that define these two worlds, the virtual and the physical one. And if at the end of the day, we want to have these lines, these limits. So I feel it's a big challenge for all of us.
Indeed, I agree with the sentiments, and thank you for bringing it to the personal note, because this is rather personal, isn't it? And we start thinking about these technologies, Jens. But I kind of want to go segue into what Maria is expressing, because, it begins with design. As I've often said, that you can have art without technology, audience, but you cannot have technology without art. And it begins with design, beautiful design, schematically. But we're seeing design and art take on new forms within frontier intelligence and spatial intelligence. Think about it, when we see the power of diffusion models that are able to render out small clips of video assets in AI that never existed. We're seeing avatars and characterizations that are at human eye resolution scale, that for some I'm sure all of us have seen a glimpse of the type of AI that we've seen rendered out in video form, whether it's a recursive model or a diffusion model, that you did not know at first glance that that was a synthetic being, if you will. And if it weren't for the concatenative synthesis, I think in terms of video or speech, it would have been compelling that you would be dealing with a human in a video. As we see it, as we know today, oh gosh, there's so many questions. But as we see it today, Jens, and Dr. Diaz, we're coming back to you because we're talking about the expansion of these virtual worlds. You brought up something that was so poignant in thinking that what we've seen displayed before us has been really encouched in enterprise and entertainment. But it's getting ready to be so much more. But I don't want to go too far into that, but I do want to pick that up. Jens, what distinguishes virtual existence from augmented reality and other digital experiences? But segueing into what we were just speaking about, when we think about the virtual layer of stemming from the material layer, what does that mean in art form?
First of all, I really have to get back to all these incredibly lovely answers of you three ladies. It's tremendous to me to see that what I would want to express about the personal take on these technologies. You expressed it all together, and that shows to me that this interconnection that we can achieve and this mutual agreements we can achieve on what humanity actually can do is really leading over into I know there's questions connected with privilege and you know, having access to these technologies, but for me there is nothing else to do but gather all these beautiful epiphanies around this technology and then look at the shadow side of it. And well, getting back to your question, augmented reality brings back the reality as we see it into the game, whereas if we are in a virtual reality, we just really are in the void and fishing for images and look where we are fishing with light, so to speak, you know, and trying to express. I had a very fun discussion yesterday with a friend around neurons. So we are practically this accumulation of billions of neurons that receive a gestate or a digest and then emit or let's say project or and output things. So augmented reality, in contrast to a virtual reality or the virtual realities, intersects our playground with the real world, which is very juicy, I would say, especially for creators that are sculpture related or would want to make a point about a certain space on this beautiful world, you know, or actually cruel world. So we can have statements done within augmented reality we wouldn't be able to do, or we would have to recreate in a virtual world. Does that answer what you were asking? I don't know.
It's rather appropriate, and it came from the expressions of what it is that you wanted to share. So all answers are appropriate here in GatherVerse. And so thank you for sharing that, Jens. And Ruth, let's segue in, and we'll pick up the tone a little bit. So we think about community centralization when it comes to the virtual layer and how we interact, how it expresses unto us. For so long, we've had thought about avatar to avatar, meaning humans that are creating these avatars, but we also come from the gaming world of NPCs. We come from characters that aren't necessarily real. But in this reality that we're looking at with spatial intelligence, with some of the work that Fei Li, for example, is hard working on when she looks at the intersection of these very advanced models and extended reality, the metaverse, if you will, a virtual ecosystem of interaction and communication on community, on human centralization. Sure, we looked at NPCs and they were very slow moving. They were very limited in speech. But now we know through the advancements of chain of thought reasoning and the capabilities for models to continue to express in an extended fashion, we're not dealing with the same type of level of community that I now realize that pretty soon I'll be able to ingress into an environment that's so hyper real, filled and stacked with people that I can have conversations with throughout the day, long extended, come back the next day, they'll remember that conversation, and they are not real, but they look more real or just as real as you and I. What are we looking at with this extension of new social norms and behaviors?
Wow. Yeah, so what I hear you talking about is, in some respect, the intersectionality of AI and virtual immersion experiences, and this concept that we are soon going to be able to choose in how to have a meaningful conversation with ourselves and with technology. And that's already happening. Like last night, I picked up my phone and thought, who should I call? And then I thought, ChatGPT is probably going to give me my quickest answer. And so I just started a conversation with ChatGPT and realized there was an upgraded version where I didn't have to send my message. It was sensitive to when I stopped talking and had really authentic and very, and when I say authentic, I question myself there, but let's say very emotive responses and validating. And I thought, wow, it's getting to the point where it's kind of doing me better than me. And giving me some important next steps and ideas where I was feeling stuck. So I think that there is a privilege to human contact that we've never had to think about choosing something other than that. Maybe with our animals or pets or nature, that has been its own kind of intimacy. But now we can grow intimacy with technology and never encounter another human being. So what is the value of connecting with people who are human, who are going to forget what we said, who are going to sometimes use what we said against us, especially with anonymous ideas, identities, and exploring our own shadows and these different parts inside of us that have never gotten to really explore their power. What is the value of finding each other and choosing each other despite that super intelligence access of artificial reality? And I believe that what we're going to find is the serendipity of meeting and connecting with human beings, even when we forget each other, will continue to prove its own special value and place. Because even though I was talking to ChatGPT last night, it was actually asking for advice on how to connect with human beings and a community better. And so I believe that artificial intelligence is just another bridge back to ourselves and our sense of what is our shared humanity and how do we do ourselves better.
Indeed. And Jenny, on the heels of that, we talk about normalization of relationship with machines. Do you find this to be prospectively a relationship? And can we consider this a social norm that I can ingress into an environment, or as Ruth said over dinner, she's just having communication. Look, I've had more of a relationship, if you will. I do question my own self with the usage of AI, but I'm having communication with these models, especially extended advanced voices, in ways I've never had before when it comes to a machine. Back to the reality is that my model will not always stay within my device. I will be able to sit down and have supper, if you will, with a machine face to face and enjoy a relationship. I know, audience, that may seem very far off, but that's more closer than we've ever realized, and it's right around the corner. Jenny, can this be the normal? Can this be the consideration? There's more that I could say on that, but I'll refrain.
I would say there's two sides to that. I think that there's the concept that we have like an expanded universe, expanded relationship. Now that AI is coming into the conversation. I also think that there's a lot of studies right now on loneliness, and can these generative AI models help with that, or is it creating more isolation if people choose to speak to their chat GBT instead of their friend across town. And I think it's a learning. I think there's a lot of alarmists that think that that's going to create more isolation. But I also think that there's some value in that, where it could be helping with the loneliness problem. But we do know that that's a big, and actually that's not even a question for me. It's for Ruth, being the PhD psychologist. But loneliness is a big thing. So is social anxiety and all of these things. And are we helping that, or are we hurting that? Is kind of the question that I think that we're exploring. But we have expanded our concept of relationship now that we can talk to AI, and that's going to continue. So I think that we just, as creators, as developers, as scientists, we need to be cognizant of the effects and what we're putting out into the world. And if it's making more isolation and more loneliness, then how can we use this technology to bring people together instead of keep them apart? So that's a big thing I've been looking at. Jen's mentioned, and I'm kind of going off track from the question, but Jen's mentioned access. And I think that there's great value, and I'm working on a project right now that's kind of taking a step back on the tech and going back to a mobile AR gamification that actually is meant specifically to put people back out into nature and back out into the world and connecting with each other in a format where we're not excluding anybody. So I've done VR. I love VR personally. I think it's amazing, and it's a great technology to explore in, but it's very exclusionary. And if you want to take something that can touch everybody, then mobile is still our first access point. So anyways, I kind of digressed, but I think there's a lot to unpack around this, and whether we're creating more good than harm is something that we should all be looking at.
Such sentiments, and thank you. And there is a lot to unpack. It's very intriguing and fascinating, Maria, just what Jenny and Dr. Diaz is expressing, because I haven't attended an event or a circle where these conversations are rehearsed, where we've heard this over and over again. I submit, and perhaps audience, you have. Maybe this is a daily outing for you. It's certainly not for me. I'd like to think that I'm pretty up to date with the technology and expansion. But I'm saying that to say is that we've never been this way before. And even in the consideration and the normalization of social communication and relationship development with machines, that I can't think of one single study that's out there that examines what this will be forward facing or future going. And so it is a concern. My concern with what Jenny said is that, yes, it will be a concern, but my other concern on top of that is that there's no processes yet that exist to be able to examine that to that scale. But it also brings to heart that we will have to use our conscience and the minds that we've been given coming from our mother's womb. But that's a whole different narrative. Maria, we have on the next question, and allow me to extend it some. How does virtual existence influence the way we perceive time and space? Meaning that many of us have been in immersive experiences where we have almost lost a sense of time. And we start talking about space, whether it's augmented projection or real-time augmented projection. There's those such as the Oriembars of the world that have been working on the AR cloud, if you will, extending reality on top of reality that we know it as to be. We think about this consideration of time and space. Now that this digital layer is becoming more real, more hyper real, blending in with reality, that I really can approach a forest that's completely virtual, augmented projection into the world, and I won't be able to discern the real forest from the virtual forest, lest I get more familiar and to be able to tangibly touch it or not touch it. Here's my point. How does virtual existence influence when we think about the perception of time and space? What might that look forward in the future for us, in near future?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, like all the conversations we have been having. But let me just quickly add something to the previous question for something that Jenny said, because it just popped up to my mind. I was going to approach, when we start answering these questions, we always think on the negative side. But I feel, yes, that this virtual existence can also help with isolation. And I reminded myself about a film called Her, that it was created 10 years ago. 10 years ago, like they're visionaries. So it was a film with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. And Joaquin, he had an AI persona, which was his girlfriend. And it just lets me thinking, if in a few years, our friends or even ourselves, if we're going to have in the same way these digital friends that don't really exist, but they sound like they do, like Ruth was saying, or if it sounds real, why wouldn't it be feasible, you know? If we have friends that say that their boyfriend or girlfriend is an AI, it fulfills a need, an emotional need. Maybe it doesn't fulfill other needs, but if it's real and if it looks real for them, I think we're walking into this new era that we cannot really say what's wrong or what is right, but it exists. So
Very, I
wanted to add to this because I was thinking this film was so visionary.
I know how uncanny this conversation really feels, especially in front of a public audience where we have a lot of people with us at GatherVerse.live. And audience, I know this may seem maybe even uncanny to you, but this is more appropriate of a discussion than we've ever known because, as Dr. Diaz had expressed earlier, thinking about what we've seen, a lot of use case in XR has been high enterprise, but it's about to be more normalized. And there's going to be things that we see by way of accelerated fashion of AI. And I could imagine, Maria, that someone would come to dinner and they have their AI partner join a group of people for dinner, and you're introducing yourself and the AI is introducing itself to them. Mm-hmm. And even the waiter and the waitress, Jens, will say, hey, it's nice to meet you. Obviously, you're not having anything off the menu, but we certainly welcome you to our restaurant. I can see that reality sooner rather than later. And it does bring in the ethical question, whether that's real or not. What does that have to do with virtual worlds? Everything, because the virtual layer is extending from this, because they won't be talking to a voice bot. When they look at that device at that dinner table, it will be someone that looks just as real as you or I are sitting here now. And I find that very fascinating with the breakthroughs that we're seeing at such an almost an alarming rate. But Jens, we think about the perception of time and space. I know it's given the ubiquity of this, but please chime in on what's been said already.
What came to mind listening to Maria and her exploration into this movie, Her, and I will try to make the bridge to the question, obviously, but I have a kid who is 19 years old right now, and I see very close how he's interacting with his virtual existence and what he tries to express at his age. I see virtual existence also to be a learning tool, and who says that it's not adequate to actually have simulations happening for children and people that are growing up to actually understand where are the red flags, and to learn what does it mean to have an integrity or being honest, and I have the notion that virtual existence, let's say virtual simulations, can help people or young people especially, to just have a better standard of what it means to be human, and it's fascinating that we are maybe learning that through the digital world, but it's definitely an extension of our consciousness. So this also maybe leads over to the topic of time and perception of time. We can speed certain things up in order then to actually know that we get to results by actually speeding down. The acceleration is definitely not something that I'm fond of. I'm confused enough with what the digital layers and the novelty brings on, and it's going to be weird. I mean, it is already very weird. We know that, and it's going to be weirder. So how are we going to confront that? I think that the concepts that are on the table now is really taking ourselves the time, and with support of maybe an AI, to tap into what time can mean. And if we are changing the perception of time, maybe everything changes. I know this is very abstract what I bring to the table, but but I have the notion that we can quite learn a lot about ourselves and about what it means to be human by these external observers, which are not external, actually become quite internal. I like very much what you said, Dr. Diaz, around the shadow. The shadow work can be done with the support of AI. And I mean, obviously, it depends a lot on what we feed this AI in order to understand what the shadows actually are. And there's a huge space for manipulation. But anyways, I'm really trying to tap into what are the best practices around that. And that doesn't happen between machines, it happens between us. And we will always come back to the personal contact, although we will have a virtual girlfriend at the moment. And maybe it's even better that I would have a virtual girlfriend right now, because I'm not emotionally available, maybe, So, but then there will be a point of no return, because once you understand that you have to be emotionally available thanks to AI, that points out, well, take a look at XYZ in your psychology and in your actions, maybe that's something helpful for humanity, and we feel ourselves a little bit less separate from each other.
I find that just fascinating for so many people that are single and they're competing to be able to meet other people. Well, your competition just got a lot more stacked.
Okay.
Sorry. Dr. Diaz, what are the psychological implications of spending significant time in virtual environments? I ask it just like this because this is squarely for you, given the work that you do and that you've done for so many years. I think this is really poignant and appropriate to ask.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I do have that background in clinical psychology. I identify as a social scientist partly because the boundaries within the realms I'm working are very vague and unclear in an identity of a psychologist. So I'm pretty careful to stay in the social scientist realm and own that I am looking at how humans behave through this technology with each other and on their own. That being said, I think that the longer that we immerse ourselves in these environments, the more important it is for us to ask, am I here to escape from my physical reality, or am I here to become a better version of myself in my physical reality? And to give a grounded example of that, I'm going to tell you a brief story about something that happened just the other day. One of the leaders in training through Bridgemakers, his name is Curious Kibble, which is, of course, his virtual name. And he leads a weekly event on Sundays called Troll Play, which is a play on words of role play and trolling. And this is where leaders come together in a circle every week and reenact experiences with disruptors and conflicts in their communities with each other to learn more compassionate and humane ways to respond in the future if the same scenario comes up again. And what we've learned to do in the application VR chat is the people enacting that conflict actually become about 3 inches tall. And so here's all these human-sized avatars surrounding these tiny little avatars who are having this conflict, this fight. And we have a safety word, and we have body language that we can do if it escalates in a way that's turning into trauma. And then we debrief afterwards. And what that does to us is it kind of every single week, I find that the first 20 minutes where we're setting the norms and setting the container goes by slowly. And then the last hour and 10 minutes goes by like blinking the eye. And so the time is deeply influenced by how much presence we're bringing and how intentional we are about transforming ourselves as human beings. And my hope is that in this question of psychological implications with time is that we go in more and more to these immersive and privileged technology experiences with the goal to transform our humanity. Whether we're interacting with somebody else's virtual imaginative dream, we're in their world, so to speak, or we're interacting with an artificial intelligence, which was also somebody's imaginative dream. Is it bringing me back to me to do me better when things go wrong with other people in my physical and virtual reality?
You know, it's fascinating as I listen to each of you in expression. Jenny, I think about the theme of this actual roundtable and the governance structure of the Virtual World Symposium event that we're at. But to the theme of this particular roundtable was virtual existence. As I'm literally listening to each of you, it seems to me it's being defined as an extension of humanity. Go ahead, please.
I would agree. It is an extension of our persona. It's an extension of humanity, of reality, and the work that you're describing, Dr. Diaz, is so important. And also what Jen's mentioned about his child. I think as parents, we need to look at how we're educating young people as well, and being cognizant of the fact that they are living in this extended reality and community. And are we teaching them critical thinking skills and critical skills in communicating and handling their feelings and handling trolling and handling all of these things? And I don't think we're there yet as far as how to teach our children to be in this new reality, because it's adults that maybe don't get this reality doing the teaching most of the time. And I think that it's something that as community and as parents, we really need to look at. And I know I wandered off, but it really is a different reality. It's a different community. It's a different extension of who we are in the world. And the world has also been extended. The world is now both our virtual worlds, our virtual communities, our virtual relationships, and our physical relationships, and also the media and the content that we're absorbing day to day. And how do we expect kids to learn that come into this world with this digital layer already intact, that maybe don't even differentiate between, the real, the AI, what's true, what's false, what's good, what's not good for you. And I don't have an answer to that. It's just something I think about a lot, but I really think that those critical thinking skills are going to be so important. They already are so important as well.
When we think about that, the different things that are going to be needed, it seems to me that us as a collective, we have a given colloquial trajectory of what's needed for what's to come. And I know that we tend to move with trends and market and what's trending up and what's relevant. But I just can't think of anything more relevant for technology, Maria, that we're talking about than preparing for the coming wave. When we talk about what are the most significant challenges in establishing a meaningful virtual existence, with the core of the work that you're doing, of what you're focused on, not just with clients, but the core of it with your immersive, with teaching and guiding technologists ethically to go in a good way, to innovate for human betterment. What does that now mean to you? Because what started off as the mission has certainly scaled and evolved as we move forward. So is the way of things. But what does this mean to you when we think about virtual existence really typifying the extension of humanity?
Well, I think we only have a few minutes, right? But I think the major challenge is, how do we define guidelines or limits, or how do we protect ourselves in these virtual worlds if we don't even agree, not in a bad sense, but we don't even agree on the concept of the virtual existence? Everything has happened so fast that how can we create rules for something that we are not sure if it exists or not, or maybe if it exists for some, but it's a whole different story for other people. That's the challenge. First of all, we need to agree on something. What would be the virtual existence? What is okay to, you can do something, well, for example, in society, we have rules, okay? If we break these rules, we risk, for example, going to jail. But we need to have certain rules to coexist in these virtual worlds. We cannot just have a whole different persona that cannot behave and can do harm to people, because virtual beings can also do harm to real people. So I think the biggest challenge is, how can we even start to think on having rules? We need rules to coexist. And rules are good because we can define our own limits, and we can protect each other, and we can respect each other. So I feel that's the biggest challenge for all of us.
That's rather appropriate too, and defining a new rules and boundaries and healthy boundaries, similar to the work that Dr. Diaz is involved in when it comes to. That's really a fascinating study that she's been involved in when it comes to trolling, because the reality is that we have to realize that these AI models, they pattern and dictate themselves based on our behavior. And if we're going to extend reality, then we know that we must bring reality with it. But having good guidance and governance structures and training these models in a better way, we certainly would always prefer it to lead to that and healthier situations, because we'll be coming in contact. And some people say, well, why does this apply to me? I'll never own a VR headset. That's true. But the reality of the world that you're living in and the products that you consume, and just simply by walking around your neighborhood, the virtual layer will find itself present at some point in your interaction, online or offline. It's arriving. And Jen, we come to the end of this with a very heightened and extended sense of now what is virtual existence, but knowing that there's billion more interpretations that are out there. And not everybody's going to see, Maria, eye to eye on what this actually means and defined as. But as we move forward, Jens, when we talk to the different people that are with us today, not just the innovators, but those that are using these tools of technology in more real ways than we ever imagined before, what words would you leave to all of us based on what's been expressed today when we start to think about how will I apply virtual existence in my life?
Oh, wow. I don't know whether it's a privilege to be answering that, or whether I'm opening up the box of Pandora. have the notion that human life comes with a responsibility, and there is a meaning to our lives. And I have the notion that we have to keep ourselves in check to nurture the inner journey to a degree where we really can live up to the gift that we are being given, to be alive. And yeah, it probably is all going into introspection, you know. Oh, I don't know whether I can even expand more on that, but we all want to feel better. That's the thing, and the way to achieve that, the answer is in us, and to foster just really a good practice with ourselves, and interconnecting, and then interconnecting from that point of view, or from that fostering of peace, and actually confidence, or trust. We have to have that trust in life, and everything should lead to that. And fostering that in ourselves is a huge task, and I think that may be bringing the meaningfulness to whatever experience we are having in the outside world. You're muted.
Forgive me. I find that a beautiful cap to a beautiful roundtable discussion. The way that you just almost preciously ended this is talking about within, that while Maria confidently and advocates for, we'll need rules moving forward. And Dr. Diaz, with the work that you're doing when it comes to understanding the psychology behind the behavior and community structures, and Jenny, with everything that you're expressing when it comes to how we use this technology today and what it might look like tomorrow, with observances that we're still discovering. What I really appreciate what was just said by each of you, that it leads up to the idea that ultimately, as we move forward in this world of hyperreal and frontier intelligence audience, that there will be no